There may be a development this morning in trying to get those people out of the steel plant. NBC News foreign correspondent Raf Sanchez joins us now live from Lviv in Ukraine. Raf, what more can you tell us? This has been frustrating to so many people for months now, getting those people, civilians and fighters, Ukrainians, out of that steel factory. Is there hope this morning that they may get out?
Willie, there is a faint glimmer of hope for women and children in what remains of that steel plant. President Zelensky's office saying today that they are preparing an operation to evacuate civilians from that steel plant. That's according to Reuters. It has not been confirmed by NBC News. The United Nations is not confirming anything at this point, but we know that they did move a team down to Zaporizhzhia in the east of Ukraine yesterday to get them into place in case a window of opportunity did open up for a humanitarian evacuation from that steel plant. Willie, just to inject a couple notes of caution here. There is nothing official from the Russians, and they obviously have a veto on this. They have agreed many times in the past to humanitarian corridors, and they have reneged at the last moment. We have been speaking to a Marine who's inside that steel plant. He tells us there has been talk of evacuation every day for the last 4 days, and nothing has come of it. He says he is not seeing anything yet today that indicates that an evacuation is going to go ahead. And Willie, this is one of the things that has just been so striking about this siege. These people are underground. They have barely any food, barely any water. They cannot see the daylight, but they have cell service, and they can tell us about the unimaginable conditions down there. President Zelensky telling Time magazine he speaks every day to the commander of the Ukrainian Marine unit inside that plant, trying to get a sense of what he and his fighters are going through. There is no word right now about whether wounded Ukrainian troops would be able to come out if this evacuation were able to go ahead. The commander of that Marine unit saying 600 of his men are wounded, and he says they will die down there in the darkness if they don't get the medical attention that they need. So it is still a very fast-moving picture here in Ukraine and on the ground in Mariupol this morning, but this feels like it could be a critical day in this weeks-long siege. Willie?
And you're right, that video is extraordinary. You can see the horror and the exhaustion on the faces of those people who've been underground for weeks. Raf, let me ask you quickly about the missiles that struck Kyiv. There had been some sense that Kyiv was safe at this point in the war, that Russia had failed in its attempt to take that city and had fallen back to the east. And yet, missiles lobbed from Russia into the capital city yesterday. What do you make of that?
Well, the Ukrainian government makes of it that this was a very clear attempt to humiliate the Secretary General of the United Nations. These missiles started raining down just an hour or so after he wrapped up his meeting with President Zelensky earlier in the day. He went on a walking tour of Borodyanka. That's one of those suburbs, along with Bucha, whose names will now just be etched in infamy as one of the places where Russian forces appear to have committed mass war crimes. And the read from President Zelensky's office is that this was the Kremlin sending a very clear message to the United Nations, to the international community, not to interfere with their operations in Ukraine. We now know one person has died in that missile strike, missiles hitting 2 residential buildings. 10 people were injured. The Russian Ministry of Defense saying that they were targeting Ukrainian military production facilities. And Willie, this is just a reminder that while the fighting is going on the ground in the east, the Russians more and more are targeting every corner of this country, from Kyiv to Lviv to Odessa, with their missiles. Willie?
Yeah, it reminds me when President Biden was over the border in Poland and some missiles were lobbed not far where you're standing right now in Lviv. NBC's Raf Sanchez in Ukraine for us again this morning. Raf, thanks so much.